All right, so this video is again about Miles Davis, but we're going to concentrate more heavily on the Miles Davis of the 40s. In order to get started, however, we're going to predate this a little bit and actually start this journey around 1935. As is known to most people, Miles came up with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was in an upper middle class black family in East St. Louis, later in life, but he was actually born in Alton, Illinois, which is where the family had its genesis. His father was a dentist, and he saw all of the people that actually could afford his services. And one of those was a gentleman named Elwood Buchanan, who was a local trumpet player and band director at Lakewood High School over in East St. Louis. He played on riverboats and whatnot, so he was kind of a classical player as well as a jazz player. He had studied with the principal trumpet player in the St. Louis Symphony, so he had legitimate training. In 1935, Miles Davis started studying trumpet with Elwood Buchanan. And the first thing Elwood did was chastise Miles for using the wide vibrato that was in vogue at the time among all jazz and blues players. No, man, you gotta use a straight tone and keep it right in the middle. You won't, not too much bass, not too much treble. It's a nice mellow sound, round sound, and straight. Not all that old nervous wiggling stuff. And of course, anytime Miles would get, a little of a challenge, because he was a nonconformist. He did not like to do what you told him to do. Whenever he would start adding that vibrato to his sound, he would get slapped. Elwood wasn't anything to play with. At any rate, that journey went on for a few years. The family eventually moved across the bridge into East St. Louis, over on Kansas Street, and these lessons continued. By the time Miles was 12 years old, he was actually pretty accomplished. He's playing in little school bands, and he's starting to play little gigs, and he's going to talent shows. Some of his siblings are encouraging him a little bit. His mother was never quite happy. She didn't like the trumpet, maybe because it was loud. I don't know, but she didn't like that trumpet. She wanted him to play violin because she was a pianist and a violinist, and she wanted him to play a proper instrument. And Miles was not interested in anything proper, so the most proper thing he did was play with a straight tone on that trumpet. Sometime as he grew a little older, probably 15, 16 years old, he joined the marching band at Lincoln High School under his old trumpet teacher, Elwood Buchanan. By this time, he was already starting to take lessons himself from Elwood's teacher, who was the principal player in the St. Louis Symphony. So Miles is getting really good classical training at that time, getting everything all refined and whatnot. And guess what? Billy Eckstine come to town. And Billy Eckstine has got all the bad cats. He's got Charlie Parker in the band, he's got Dizzy in the band, he's got Art Blakey in the band, and the trumpet player gets sick. Well, everybody knew Miles could play, and the band is stuck in East St. Louis with no trumpet player. So they called little Miles up. And so there's little teenage Miles playing with the Billy Eckstine band with Charlie Parker and all the cats that were going to later become household names in jazz. And Miles was bit by that bug. He played 2 weeks with them and decided then and there that he had to get to New York. And his mother once again stepped in. Oh, no, New York too fast. You need to go to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Much more proper and refined. Yes, I've been there. It is very proper and refined. But Miles wasn't going anywhere proper and refined. And even though he was heading to Juilliard, he had a little hiccup in his plan. You see, he had a girlfriend. And every now and then, if you're not careful, when you start mixing that blues with the ragtime, you might get a little jazz. And sure enough, just like that, Miles had a little baby daughter, had a girlfriend, and now he got a little family. But the girlfriend was supportive, and she was all about him moving to New York. Now the plan was he's going to go to Juilliard and study music, and he did for a while. He studied piano and theory and dictation, which is pretty much ear training. I find it curious he didn't study trumpet or playing in any bands or orchestras. It seems to me that he was only studying the things that would later serve him well as he pursued his jazz career. Now, while at Juilliard, Miles missed a few classes because he was all over the city hunting Charlie Parker. One night he ran into Coleman Hawkins while he's on this journey. And Coleman goes, "Oh, no, man. Forget Bird, baby. You don't want no part of Bird. You want to stay in Juilliard and get your degree." Well, next year rolls around and Miles somehow fails to register. His complaint was, "Oh, they want to teach me that European music, man. I want to play some of our music. All they want to teach me that European stuff." Yeah, well, he finally found Charlie Parker, and he started hanging out at Minton's, where the bebop was developing, and Monroe's, another club, where bebop was developing. And he's hanging out with all the cats, J.J. Johnson, Charlie Parker, you know the cats, Monk, you know, it's all good. Started associating with Mingus and whatnot, and pretty soon he's in the middle of the scene and playing in the band with those guys, and it's all going well. And Dizzy is still in and out of Parker's band, so Miles has to find other gigs with some big bands, which he did. He played in a few big bands as well to supplement his income, and I think he was paid something like in today's money, like $580 a month or something like that, $580 a week, I'm sorry, for his services. So he wasn't making a tremendous lot of money, but he was making a little money to survive. And then finally, he started playing with Parker quite a lot and traveling with Parker and touring. And on one of those tours, let's say Parker fell ill. That's probably a good way to say it. He fell ill out in California and had to be hospitalized for a number of months. So Miles came back to New York and started doing his own thing. And now's the time, and other things started coming out with Miles on it. And he started getting some solo stuff, and he's starting to do his own recordings, and things are starting to happen, and the bebop is happening, and Miles' stock is rising, and people going, "Who is this young cat?" And yeah, man, Miles has it going. So by the late 40s, Miles is like, he's turning heads, you know, because he was playing with Parker like at 16, 17. You know, who is this young genius? And he just keeps on looking for the next thing, next thing, next thing. So somewhere near the end of the 40s, 1949, 1950, he started his nonet. In case you all don't know what a nonet is, that's just an ensemble with 9 players. And 2 of the players should never be in a jazz band. I said never. That's right. French horn player and a tuba player. Yeah. And that had a kind of a orchestral vibe to the recording. So as much as Miles complained about the study of classical music, it seems that classical music creeped into his work in the late 40s. Now this nonet recorded and eventually created the whole Birth of the Cool legacy and whatnot, which most people either love or decry. We're split on how that thing fits into the whole jazz lexicon, but it's definitely a pivotal recording with great arrangements by Guild and whatnot. So, it's something you should listen to. It's something you should know, regardless to whatever your tastes are. The Nonet was not very popular because bebop is still hot, and the Nonet was kind of the beginning of cool jazz, which Miles is now forecasting the next iteration of jazz. He is blown up in the bebop era, and now before the bebop era is over and before we're in the hard bop, he's already into the cool thing. Miles was a visionary. He's a nonconformist. He's always moving ahead. He's always not satisfied with the status quo. So he pushed that and on that thing. And they only had one gig. They only had one gig. As I said, they were not real popular during this bebop era. They weren't hot. But they opened up for the Count Basie band at a club for about a week or so. And that probably was their undoing, because if you're playing a kind of a esoteric symphonic type of a jazz, and the next thing up on the stage is the swinging Kansas City sound of Count Basie, man, people are going to dismiss you real fast at this point in time. Because people at this point in time, they're ready to dance. You got Savoy happening and things like that, and Cotton Club and all that. People are about to move and whatnot. So Nonet had a very short life, and it's pivotal because it gave us an integration of classical and jazz, and it forecast the cool, and that was Miles Davis's journey in the 40s, from starting to play the trumpet in 1935 to pretty much being the big cat. We should call him the young lion on Charlie Parker's stage by 1946, and by 1949 he's already forecasting the next iteration of the expansion of jazz. And that is going to continue to be his mantra throughout his career. But for this particular segment, I wanted to concentrate on the Miles Davis of the 40s, since we're dealing with this bebop era. And remember, he's still hanging out with JJ. He's still hanging out with Kenny Clark, who was the in-house drummer at Minton's. He's still hanging out with Monk. You got Bud coming in and out of the place. Of course, you got Bird, you got all these other cats that are coming in and out. So Miles was a big part of that whole bebop thing right in the middle of it. Something else that you might know, find interesting. Everyone realizes that Miles was a great band leader, great band leader. And where did that come from? Well, it comes from he was in St. Louis, a very young kid, still a teenager. He became a member of a band that was called the Blue Devils. And very early on, he's still a teenager, the leader of the Blue Devils anointed Miles as the music director, which means he selected the music to perform, and he selected the musicians, which means he hired and fired. So at a very early age, he had to develop an ear, not just for sound and talent, innovation and all that, but also for personalities that could work together in a peaceful manner and create the communication that is essential to jazz improvisation. So it wasn't like Miles woke up one morning and this thing just happened to him when he started his groups in the late 40s and the 50s. Miles had been doing this since the early 40s when he was still a kid in St. Louis. So that is just a little bit of the Miles Davis story over a decade or so. There's much more you're going to hear about Miles because he's just a cat, man. He brought us from a mighty long way, as we like to say in the Baptist church. But I ain't talking about the way we talk about it in church. I'm talking about in terms of the development of this wonderful music we call jazz. Thank you, Miles Dewey Davis.